What if the money in your bank account, your retirement savings, and every dollar you pay in taxes were all part of a countdown to zero? It sounds like something from a dystopian movie, but the numbers hidden deep within the US government's balance sheets tell a terrifying story. A story that politicians on both sides of the aisle are desperately trying to keep you from understanding. They want you to believe the system is stable, that your future is secure. But the truth is, we are trapped in a mathematical equation with only one possible outcome: a complete and total collapse. And the fuse has already been lit. The number that proves this isn't some complex algorithm. It's a figure that is growing so fast, it's almost impossible to comprehend. And what this number represents is the single greatest threat to the modern world as we know it. The United States is currently buried under a mountain of debt exceeding $34 trillion. It's a number so vast that our brains can't even process its scale. Let's try to put it in perspective. If you spent $1 million every single day since the moment Jesus was born, you still wouldn't have spent $1 trillion today, let alone $34 trillion. To pay it off, every single American family would have to write a check for over $260,000 on top of all their other taxes and expenses. But here's the part that signals we're past the point of no return. That number is no longer growing by the year or the month. It's growing by the second. The government is currently spending about $2 trillion more than it takes in every single year. That's an extra $5.5 billion added to the debt pile every single day. $230 million every hour. While you've been watching the first few minutes of this video, that debt has jumped by another $10 million. It's growing faster than the economy, faster than tax revenues, faster than our ability to even pretend we can manage it. This isn't just poor accounting, it's a runaway train with no brakes, accelerating towards a cliff. And while the sheer size of the debt is staggering, the truly fatal part of the equation lies in the cost of keeping it all afloat. The silent killer in this whole scenario is the interest. Just like on a credit card, you can't borrow this much money for free. Right now, the US government is paying over $1 trillion a year just in interest payments to its creditors. Let that sink in. That isn't money going to pay down the debt itself. It's not funding schools, repairing roads, or even building up the military. It's $1 trillion vanishing into thin air, paid to bondholders in China, Japan, and here at home, just for the privilege of being in debt. This one-line item on the federal budget has become the fastest growing expense the government has. It has now officially surpassed the entire defense budget. We spend more money paying interest to our lenders than we do on the entire US military. Every soldier, every aircraft carrier, every nuclear weapon combined. And this is where the death spiral truly begins. Just a few years ago, interest rates were near zero. Now they've skyrocketed. As old, low-interest government bonds mature, they have to be replaced with new bonds at these much higher rates. This causes the interest payments to explode exponentially. The Congressional Budget Office, a government agency known for its overly optimistic forecasts, projects that within a decade, these interest payments alone will cost nearly $2 trillion a year. Soon after, they will consume every single dollar the government collects in taxes. Imagine a world where all income taxes, corporate taxes, and payroll taxes go to one place, paying interest. Nothing would be left for Social Security, Medicare, or the military. The government would have to borrow new money just to pay the interest on its old money. That is the very definition of a debt spiral, and there is no mathematical way out. So why doesn't the government just fix it? The horrifying truth is that every single potential solution only makes the problem worse. It's a trap with no escape hatch. The first and most obvious idea is austerity, drastically cutting spending. We saw this movie play out in Greece during their debt crisis. The government was forced to slash pensions, cut salaries, and eliminate public services. On paper, it sounded responsible. In reality, it was an economic apocalypse. The spending cuts triggered a catastrophic depression. The Greek economy shrank by 25%. Unemployment soared to nearly 30%, With no one working and no businesses making money, tax revenues collapsed. The cuts ended up making the deficit worse in the short term, and the debt to GDP ratio actually skyrocketed. If this was applied to the US, where consumer spending is the lifeblood of the economy, the result would be even more devastating. A $2 trillion cut in government spending would trigger a recession so deep it would make 2008 look like a minor correction. The second option is to raise taxes, but this leads to the exact same outcome. To even make a dent in the deficit, taxes would have to be raised by staggering amounts, possibly 20 or 30% across the board. Such a massive tax hike would crush businesses and consumers, slowing the economy to a crawl and once again causing tax revenues to plummet. There's a point where raising tax rates actually decreases government revenue, and we are likely already there. That leaves the third and most insidious option: inflation. The government could simply print trillions of dollars to pay its bills. This devalues the currency and makes the old debt worthless in real terms. It's a hidden tax on every person who saves money. We saw a small preview of this after 2020, but a full-scale monetization of the debt would lead to hyperinflation. Think of Weimar Germany, Venezuela, or Zimbabwe, where money became so worthless, people used it as wallpaper. Interest rates would spike to insane levels to compensate for the collapsing currency, and the government's interest costs would explode even faster, making the problem infinitely worse. This is the path many failing nations take, and it always ends in total ruin. But what if the world simply stops lending us the money we need to survive? For decades, the US has relied on the dollar's status as the world's reserve currency. Other countries needed to hold dollars to conduct international trade, so they bought US Treasury bonds, effectively lending us money at low interest rates. This was the American exorbitant privilege. But that era is rapidly coming to an end. A new economic alliance led by our geopolitical rivals China and Russia is actively working to dismantle the dollar's dominance. This group, known as BRICS, is creating its own payment systems and trade agreements that bypass the dollar entirely. Countries like Saudi Arabia are now beginning to sell oil in other currencies for the first time in 50 years. This is a monumental shift. About a quarter of all US debt is held by foreign nations. As these countries begin to see the dollar as a risky asset and a tool of American foreign policy they can be sanctioned with, they will inevitably start selling their holdings of US bonds. It won't even take a massive dump to trigger a crisis. A slow, steady sell-off would force bond prices down and interest rates up, tightening the noose around the US budget. When the world no longer needs dollars, who will buy our debt? The only answer is the Federal Reserve, which means printing money on a scale never seen before. The de-dollarization movement isn't a conspiracy theory. It's a direct economic assault, and it's the ultimate accelerant for the debt spiral. It removes the one safety net that has allowed America to live beyond its means for half a century. The final chapter begins not with a slow decline, but with a sudden, violent snap. Debt crises don't announce their arrival. They build silently beneath the surface until a single event causes the entire house of cards to collapse. The trigger could be anything. A major bank failure that the government can't contain. A new war that requires trillions in emergency spending. A debt ceiling standoff where politicians accidentally push the country into default. When it happens, it will move at the speed of light. Imagine you wake up one morning and the interest rate on the 10-year Treasury bond has doubled overnight. Financial markets would instantly freeze. The stock market would crash by 30, 40, then 50% as algorithms and panicked investors rush for the exits. Your 401k would be decimated in a matter of hours. The Federal Reserve would try to intervene, announcing emergency bond buying programs, but it would be too late. Their intervention would only signal desperation, causing the dollar to plummet against other world currencies and triggering a mass exodus of foreign capital. Within days, the crisis would hit Main Street. Banks holding trillions in government bonds that are now worthless would become insolvent. Fearing a total collapse, the government would declare a bank holiday, freezing every account in the country. You wouldn't be able to access your money. Your credit and debit cards would stop working. The entire digital payment system that our modern world relies on would shut down. What happens next is a descent into chaos. Supply chains would break. Gas stations would run dry. Grocery store shelves would be empty within 48 hours. Without a functioning payment system, businesses can't pay their employees, and trucks stop delivering goods. This isn't speculation. It's the predictable mechanical breakdown of a complex system when its foundation, trust in the currency, is removed. The government, unable to borrow and with collapsing tax revenues, would be left with only one tool, the printing press, unleashing a wave of hyperinflation that would destroy any remaining wealth and savings. The most infuriating part of this looming catastrophe is that everyone in a position of power knows it's coming. They see the same numbers. They understand the same unforgiving math. But to publicly admit that the debt is unpayable would be political suicide and would trigger the very panic they are trying to prevent. So they engage in a dangerous game of extend and pretend. They kick the can down the road, raising the debt ceiling at the last possible second, papering over crises with more printed money, and hoping that something magical happens to save them. They are all trapped in a system that rewards short-term thinking and punishes fiscal responsibility. Promising more benefits without raising the taxes to pay for them wins elections. Making hard choices loses them. So the debt continues its relentless exponential climb, pushed forward by a political class that is either too cowardly or too compromised to tell the American people the truth. This conspiracy of silence is perhaps the greatest betrayal of all, as it ensures that when the crisis finally hits, the public will be completely blindsided, confused, and unprepared for the economic devastation that follows. They will be told it was an unforeseen crisis, a black swan event, but it was never unforeseen. It was inevitable.